You know how sometimes you stumble across an idea that just makes your brain do a little flip?
Oh, yeah.
Well, get ready, because today we are diving headfirst into the wonderfully perplexing world of logical
The
paradoxes.
ultimate brain teasers.
Exactly. Those scenarios that make you question, well, reality, identity, logic itself. We've picked out some fascinating ones just for you.
The kind that have had thinkers scratching their heads for, centuries.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive, to unpack these mind benders, get to the heart of the questions they're asking.
And maybe uncover some surprising insights, without getting totally bogged down in the weeds.
Exactly. Simple as that.
Yeah, what's really cool about paradoxes is how they show the edges of our reasoning,
Yeah.
the limits, kind of in language itself.
Hmm.
They force us to face these contradictions that are often just lurking beneath what we normally take for granted.
Okay, let's kick off with a classic, one that really makes you think. The Ship of Theseus. So picture this. A ship. It's constantly being repaired. Over time, every single wooden plank, every rope, every sail, it all gets replaced.
Okay.
Eventually, there isn't a single original piece left. So the question is it still the same ship?
And that's where it gets really interesting, right? Because imagine if someone collected all those old discarded parts
Right.
and used them to build a second ship.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Now you have two ships, and both seem to have a claim to being the original ship of Theseus, in a way.
Right. So what really defines the identity? Is it the physical stuff, the atoms, which have completely changed?
Or is it something else, more abstract?
Yeah, like its history, maybe, its purpose.
Right.
The idea of the ship, it really pushes you on what we mean by the same.
Precisely. It highlights this tension, doesn't it, between the physical components and what you might call its conceptual continuity.
Conceptual continuity, I like that.
Is it the same ship because it keeps sailing, keeps doing its job, has that continuous history, even if the bits are all new?
Or is identity just about the matter, the wood and nails?
Think about maybe your favorite band. The members change over the years, right? Those are the physical parts.
Yeah, happens all the time.
But you still call it the same band because of their shared history, their sound, their purpose. That's the conceptual continuity.
That makes perfect sense. It even makes you think about yourself, doesn't it? I mean, the sources mention this too.
Oh, absolutely.
Our own body's cells are constantly regenerating. So, are you the same person you were, say, 10 years ago? Physically?
That's a powerful connection. If we define ourselves just by our physical bits,
Yeah.
then you could argue we're constantly becoming different people. The Ship of Theseus makes us think that maybe our sense of self, like the ship, relies more on that feeling of a continuous story.
Our memories.
Exactly. Our ongoing memories, our perception of continuity, rather than just the ever-changing biological material.
So the core insight there is that identity isn't always about the parts, but maybe the story and the purpose we give something, including ourselves. Okay, next up. Let's mess with time a bit. The grandfather paradox.
Ah, the time travel classic.
Yeah, this one really gets your brain in a knot. Imagine you travel back in time, way back, before your grandparents even met,
Okay, I'm with you.
and you somehow prevent them from ever getting together.
Right. So the immediate consequence, well, the paradox points it out clearly. If they never met,
Then your parents wouldn't have been born.
and therefore neither would you.
Exactly, which creates this, impossible logical loop. If you were never born, how could you have possibly gone back in time to stop them?
It completely unravels itself. The action negates the possibility of the action ever happening.
So the core insight seems to be that some events might just be logically impossible because they wipe out the very conditions that would let them happen in the first place.
That's right. This paradox really brings out the philosophical tension around time travel, doesn't it?
Totally.
It suggests certain kinds of meddling with the past might just fundamentally break causality, the whole cause before effect thing.
Like, the consequences are so drastic, they make the initial act logically incoherent.
Yeah, it's not just about whether the physics works, like could you build a machine?
Right.
This suggests the logic might break down. It's like trying to draw a square circle. The very definition contradicts itself.
So the grandfather paradox flags these potential self-negating scenarios in time travel, makes you question the consistency of time itself.
Exactly. Raises fundamental questions.
All right, let's shift gears from the complexities of time to the nature of truth itself with the liar paradox.
Ooh, good one. Simple but deep.
It really is. It's just one statement. This statement is false.
And that's where the fun begins, as you said. Let's break it down. If we assume this statement is false, is actually true,
Okay.
then what it says must be correct, meaning the statement is false.
But hang on, if we assume the statement is false, then the claim it makes that it is false is itself false, which means the statement must be true.
It's an endless loop. You can't escape it.
It feels like it breaks your brain. So the key takeaway here is that self-reference, just pointing back at itself, can kind of break logic, suggesting truth isn't always straightforward.
Exactly. It's a self-referential problem. The statement talks about itself, and that generates this inescapable contradiction.
It really shakes up our usual idea of truth as being either, true or false, one or the other.
Definitely. And the sources we looked at mentioned this has implications beyond just philosophy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It touches on logic, maths, even AI.
Yeah, why is that so significant?
Well, because formal systems think computer code,
Yeah.
mathematical proofs, they rely on really consistent definitions of true and false.
Okay.
The liar paradox shows how easily self-reference can sneak in and create these inconsistencies that those systems really struggle with. It makes us ask if truth can always be neatly boxed up like that.
So a tiny sentence reveals this deep complexity about truth and language. Makes you wonder if our everyday black and white view of truth is always enough.
It definitely prompts us to question if that simple binary view holds up, especially when language starts looping back on itself like that.
Okay, now let's delve into a set that's puzzled people for ages, Zeno's paradoxes, especially the ones about motion.
Zeno, making movement impossible since ancient Greece.
Right. So the sources give a couple of classics. First, the dichotomy paradox. Imagine trying to walk across a room.
Okay.
To get to the other side, you first have to cover half the distance, right?
Makes sense.
But then, to cover that remaining half, you first have to cover half of that, and then half of that, and so on.
Infinitely.
Yeah. So the logic seems to say you have to complete an infinite number of steps, these tiny shrinking halves, just to get across the room.
And since completing an infinite number of things feels impossible, motion seems impossible.
Then there's the famous one, Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles, super fast hero,
Right.
racing a slow tortoise, but the tortoise gets a head start.
Okay.
By the time Achilles reaches where the tortoise started, the tortoise has already moved a little bit further ahead.
Naturally.
And by the time Achilles reaches that new spot, the tortoise has moved again, a tiny bit, but still ahead.
And this goes on forever. The gap keeps shrinking, but it never disappears.
So the paradox suggests Achilles can never actually overtake the tortoise, because there's always another infinitely small gap to cross.
Which is totally counterintuitive, because obviously faster things overtake slower things all the time. We see it happen.
Exactly. So what's the flaw? Where does the logic go wrong?
Well, the sources point straight to calculus.
Maths to the rescue.
Pretty much. Calculus gives us the tools to understand how an infinite series of numbers that get smaller and smaller can actually add up to a finite specific amount.
Okay, like those infinite halves of the room.
Exactly. Those infinite halves do add up to the total width of the room. And for Achilles, while they always have another smaller distance to cover, those distances shrink fast enough in a specific mathematical way that the total time it takes him to cover all those infinite little gaps is finite. He does eventually pass the tortoise.
It's like adding, what, 12 plus 14 plus 18 plus 116 and so on?
Precisely. If you keep adding smaller bits, you never quite hit, say, 1 in any single step, but the total sum definitely converges towards 1.
So maths gives us a way to handle infinity and limits, showing that what seemed logically impossible from one angle is actually resolvable with better tools, the core insight being that maths can unlock these puzzles.
Exactly. Zeno's paradoxes were brilliant because even though they seemed to disprove motion, they actually pushed mathematicians to develop more rigorous ways of thinking about infinity and continuous change, led to breakthroughs like calculus.
Fascinating. Okay, now for a real head-scratcher. The barber paradox.
Yes, the village barber.
Imagine a barber who lives in a town with a very specific rule. He shaves all the people and only the people who do not shave themselves.
Got it. A clear rule.
The question is simple. Does the barber shave himself?
Okay, let's follow the logic like the rule says.
Yeah.
Option 1.
The
barber does not shave himself. Well, if he doesn't shave himself, then he fits the description of people of the board. The barber shaves those who don't shave themselves. So the barber must shave him, which is himself.
Whoa, okay, contradiction number 1. So what if he does shave himself?
Option 2. He does shave himself, but the rule says The barber only shaves those who do not shave themselves.
So if he shaves himself, he violates the rule. The barber shouldn't shave him, which is, again, himself.
Contradiction number 2. He both must shave himself and must not shave himself. It's impossible either way.
So the takeaway is that language and definitions, especially when they refer back to themselves, can just break down logically.
Precisely. And this seemingly simple puzzle, as the sources note, actually hit right at the heart of early mathematics, specifically set theory.
Really? How did a story about a barber shake up maths?
Think about it in terms of groups or sets. Consider the set the group of all sets that do not contain themselves.
Okay. My brain is starting to hurt again.
Stick with me. Does this set contain itself? If it does contain itself, well then, according to its own definition, sets that don't contain themselves, it shouldn't be in there.
Right.
But if it doesn't contain itself, then it fits the definition perfectly, so it should be in there.
It's the exact same problem as the barber.
Exactly. It's the same self-referential loop. This kind of paradox, famously highlighted by Bertrand Russell, showed a deep flaw in early set theory.
Wow.
It led Russell to develop something called type theory, basically ways to structure logic and sets to avoid these kinds of self-referential contradictions. It forced a big rethink.
So a simple question about a barber shaving himself actually forced mathematicians to rebuild parts of the foundations of logic. Amazing.
It really highlights the danger of just letting definitions loop back on themselves without careful rules. You need structure to avoid breakdown.
Okay, let's consider one that plays with our expectations about the future. The unexpected hanging paradox.
Right, the prisoner and the judge.
So a prisoner is told by a judge, "You will be hanged sometime next week, Monday to Friday." But, the judge adds, "The exact day will be a surprise. You won't know it's coming until they come to get you."
Okay, so guaranteed hanging, guaranteed surprise.
The prisoner, being logical, starts to think. Okay, he says, it can't be on Friday.
Why not?
Because if I make it to Thursday evening, and I haven't been hanged yet, I'll know it has to be Friday. It wouldn't be a surprise anymore.
Okay, that seems reasonable. So Friday's out.
Right. So knowing Friday's out, the prisoner continues, it can't be Thursday either.
I see where this is going.
Because if I make it to Wednesday evening and Friday is already impossible, then I'd know it must be Thursday. Again, not a surprise.
So Thursday's out too. And this logic just keeps rolling back.
Exactly. It can't be Wednesday because then you'd know on Tuesday night. Can't be Tuesday, you'd know Monday night. Can't be Monday because you'd know right now.
Leading the prisoner to conclude the hanging can't happen at all if it has to be a surprise.
But then the sources tell us on, say, Wednesday, the executioner shows up and the prisoner is genuinely surprised.
So the logic seems sound, but reality didn't match. Where did the reasoning go wrong?
That's the paradox. It seems the very condition that the event must be a surprise somehow undermines the logical deduction that it can't happen.
So the core insight seems to be about this clash between pure logical deduction about the future and our actual experience, especially with something like surprise.
Yeah, maybe the prisoner's ability to logically deduce the future based on the surprise condition is flawed somehow.
It suggests predicting the future based solely on analyzing our own knowledge or expectations about that future can lead to weird breakdowns.
So the takeaway is tricky. Knowledge about a future event, specifically its surprise nature, can paradoxically seem to make it impossible, yet it still happens. It highlights that weird loop between expectation and reality.
Yeah, it definitely raises questions about the limits of logic when dealing with subjective things like belief and expectation.
All right, next up, one that really twists cause and effect, the bootstrap paradox.
Ah, the causal loop.
Imagine you find a book. Inside are the complete instructions for building a time machine.
Okay, handy bye.
You use the instructions, build the machine, travel back in time, and you give that same book to your younger self, who then grows up to find it.
Right. Wait, so?
Where did the information in the book originally come from?
It seems to just exist without a clear starting point.
Exactly. It's like the information pulled itself up by its own bootstraps, hence the name.
It just loops. The book exists because of the time travel. The time travel exists because of the book.
The sources give that wild example, like, what if someone loves Beethoven's music, travels back in time with the scores, only to find Beethoven never actually existed. So the time traveler gives the scores to a publisher, and that's how Beethoven's music comes to exist.
Whoa. So the music exists, but it was never really composed in the first place. It just appeared via the loop.
Mind-bending, right. It completely messes with our usual idea of cause and effect. A leads to B leads to C. Here, C seems to lead back to A.
Yeah, this paradox is huge in science fiction, dealing with time loops, obviously.
Right.
And some theoretical physics ideas touch on similar concepts, asking if these closed causal loops are even physically possible or if they'd break fundamental laws.
So the key takeaway is that our normal understanding of cause and effect linear, one thing leading to the next, can become circular and seemingly originless in these scenarios.
It challenges that linear view of time, suggesting maybe past, present, future could be more tangled than we assume, at least theoretically.
Yeah.
Forces us to consider if something could exist without a true beginning.
Okay, let's tackle one that probes the limits of power itself. The omnipotence paradox.
The irresistible force meets the immovable object, kind of.
Sort of. The classic question is, can an omnipotent being, a being that can do absolutely anything, create a rock so heavy that even it cannot lift it?
Okay, it sounds simple, but yeah, it creates a dilemma. Let's walk through it. Option 1. Yes, the being can create such a rock.
Right.
But if it can create a rock it cannot lift, then there's something it can't do, lift the rock. Therefore, it's not omnipotent.
Okay, so yes leads to not omnipotent. What about no? Option 2, no, the being cannot create such a rock.
Well, if it cannot create such a rock, then again, there's something it can't do, create that specific rock. So it's still not omnipotent.
It seems like either answer, yes or no, leads to the conclusion that the being isn't truly omnipotent, it's trapped.
Exactly. Now, the sources explore different ways philosophers try to resolve this. One common approach is the logical interpretation.
Gibbs says.
It suggests maybe omnipotence doesn't mean the ability to do the logically impossible. Creating a rock that an omnipotent being can't lift might be like asking it to create a square circle. It's a contradiction in terms, not a failure of power.
So omnipotence means ability to do anything logically possible.
That's one view. But then others argue, well, doesn't that definition itself place a limit? And maybe the very concept of absolute unlimited power is inherently flawed or paradoxical when you examine it closely.
So the core takeaway is that our very definitions of power, when pushed to the absolute extreme, can start to break down under logical scrutiny, suggesting maybe there are inherent limits even in the concept of omnipotence.
Yeah, it really forces us to think critically about the words we use, like omnipotence or unlimited, and whether they hold up consistently, especially with these extreme ideas.
Fascinating. Okay, finally, let's explore a paradox that takes us into the really weird world of quantum mechanics. Schrodinger's cat.
The most famous cat in physics, probably, and maybe the most misunderstood.
Quite possibly. So it's a thought experiment. You imagine a cat sealed in a box.
Okay.
Inside the box with the cat, there's a tiny bit of radioactive material, a Geiger counter, a hammer, and a vial of poison gas.
A rather elaborate setup for the poor cat.
Indeed. The idea is, if the radioactive atom decays, which is a random quantum event, it triggers the Geiger counter.
Right.
Which then releases the hammer, which smashes the vial of poison, which, well, kills the cat.
Grim. But the key is the quantum part, right? The atoms decay.
Exactly. According to quantum mechanics, until we actually measure or observe the atom, it exists in a weird state called superposition.
Meaning?
Meaning it's simultaneously in all its possible states at once. So the atom is both decayed and not decayed at the same time. Think of it like a coin spinning in the air. It's neither heads nor tails until it lands and you look.
Okay, particle can be in multiple states until measured.
Right. And since the cat's fate is directly linked to the atom's state, the paradox, as Schrodinger posed it, is that until we open the box and observe the system, the cat itself is also in a superposition. It's both alive and dead simultaneously.
Now, obviously, Schrodinger didn't mean cats can literally be alive and dead. It was meant to highlight how weird quantum rules seem when applied to everyday objects.
Right. It shows the strangeness of quantum superposition and the role of measurement. It seems like particles exist in this fuzzy state of possibilities.
Until the act of measurement or observation somehow forces them to choose a single definite state. Like the spinning coin finally landing heads or tails.
So the message seems to be that observation plays this fundamental role in defining reality, at least at the quantum level. It's not just that we don't know if the cat is alive or dead until we look.
It's almost as if the act of looking itself is what makes it one or the other. It collapses the possibilities into a single reality, which raises that huge question. Does measurement create the definite state?
Yeah. Does reality exist independently of us observing it, or does observation play a key role in making it definite? So the key takeaway is that reality at these tiny scales might be probabilistic, fuzzy, and maybe even dependent on the observer.
It completely challenges our everyday intuition about a solid, deterministic world where things just are what they are, whether we look or not. Quantum mechanics suggests it might be much stranger.
Wow. Well, that was quite a journey through some seriously mind-bending ideas.
Definitely a deep dive.
It reminds me of that meta paradox mentioned in the sources. The more we try to make sense of the world, the stranger it becomes.
That sums it up nicely. These paradoxes aren't just intellectual puzzles, are they? They really chip away at our basic assumptions about logic, language, identity, time, reality itself.
They reveal hidden complexities and things we thought were simple.
Absolutely. And they push us to refine our understanding, to build better models, whether in logic, maths, or physics.
So for you, our listener, we're genuinely curious. Which of these paradoxes really stuck with you? Which one is still making your brain do that little flip?
Yeah, what thoughts are still swirling?
And maybe to leave you with one final provocative thought. Could our everyday understanding of simple things, identity, time, truth, could they be built on foundations that, like these paradoxes, contain hidden contradictions?
Perhaps these aren't just abstract problems out there, but maybe they subtly influence how we think and perceive the world every day without us even realizing it. Something to chew on.